Welcome to One Photograph, One Story, a weekly series where we take one famous photograph and uncover the story behind it. And for our very first story, we're starting with one of the strangest photographs in history, the Cottingley Fairies. 2 young girls, 5 photographs, and a world-famous author, and a mystery that lasted more than 60 years. If you've never heard of this story before, you're in for a good one. In the summer of 1917, 2 girls walked down to a stream in the English countryside. One was 16, the other was 9. They took a camera with them. When they returned, they claimed they had photographed something impossible. Not a ghost, not an apparition, but fairies. Tiny, winged creatures gathered in the grass. Their parents didn't believe them, but the girls had photographs. And when those photographs eventually made their way into the hands of one of the most famous writers in the world, something unexpected happened. He believed them. Suddenly, what had started as a strange childhood story became something much bigger. The photographs were examined. They were discussed by experts. They were published. And before long, people around the world were asking the same question. Had 2 young girls actually captured the proof of another world? For decades, the photographs remained one of the most intriguing pieces of evidence in the history of the supernatural. But there was something nobody knew, a secret that would remain hidden for more than 60 years. So what really happened beside that little stream in Yorkshire? And how did 2 girls manage to convince the world that they had photographed fairies? This is the story of the Cottingley Fairies. The photographs are unsettling, partly because they don't look like the supernatural photographs we're used to seeing today. There's no strange lights, no blurry shadows, no mysterious figures lurking in the background. The fairies are right there, in plain sight. In one photograph, a young girl sits beside a stream while 4 tiny winged figures appear to hover directly in front of her. In another, a tiny creature resembling a gnome stands beside her cousin. They aren't hidden, they're almost casually placed into the scene, and that's what makes the photographs so fascinating. If they're fake, they're remarkably bold. If they're real, then these 2 girls had somehow photographed something the rest of the world had never been able to prove existed. But before we can understand why everyone believed them, we have to go back to the beginning, because the girls weren't looking for fame. They were trying to explain why they kept coming home with wet shoes. In 1917, Britain was still fighting the First World War. The country was living through enormous uncertainty. Families were separated. Young men were fighting overseas. And Frances Griffith was one of those children affected by the war. Frances was 9 years old when she came to stay with her relatives in Cottingley, West Yorkshire. Her father was serving overseas. She stayed with her mother and her cousin, 16-year-old Louise Wright. The 2 girls became close. And behind Louise's home was a wooden area surrounding a small stream called Cottingley Beck. They loved going there, but there was one problem. They kept coming back with wet shoes. Their parents wanted an explanation. The girls told them that they had been playing with fairies. Naturally, the adults didn't believe them. To the family, it was simply childhood imagination. But Louise and Frances insisted. Eventually, they decided they needed proof, and that's when the camera came out. Louise's father, Arthur Wright, was an enthusiastic amateur photographer. He owned a quarter-plate Midge camera. Photography in 1917 wasn't something you could casually do with a phone. You needed a photographic plate, or plates. You needed equipment, you needed patience, and you needed to understand what you were doing. Louise knew more about photography and art than her age might suggest. She had artistic ability and experience with photography. That detail would become extremely important decades later. But in 1917, nobody was thinking about that. The girls took the camera down to the beck, and when they returned, they asked Arthur to develop the plate. What appeared in the photograph was extraordinary. Frances was sitting near the stream, and hovering in front of her were 4 tiny figures. Fairies! Arthur couldn't believe it. In fact, he reportedly suspected that the girls had used cardboard cutouts. But when he searched for evidence, he couldn't find anything. No obvious props, no scraps of paper, nothing. Then, about a month later, the girls produced another photograph. This time, they were gnomes. And now the situation became harder for the family to ignore. For a while, the photographs stayed within the family. Then, in 1919, Elsie's mother mentioned them at a meeting of the Theosophical Society. The reaction was immediate. People wanted to see them, and one man in particular became fascinated. His name was Edward Garner. He believed the photographs could be evidence of a supernatural world. But Garner didn't stop there. He took the photographs to one of the most famous men in Britain, Arthur Conan Doyle. Yes, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. And Conan Doyle wasn't laughing. He was already deeply interested in spiritualism and saw the photographs as something potentially extraordinary. Kodak even examined the negatives. No obvious signs of photographic manipulation were found. That didn't prove the fairies were real, but it left one unsettling question. If these photographs were genuine, what exactly had the girls captured? And then the story went public. In December 1920, Conan Doyle published the photographs in the Strand magazine. Suddenly, the Cottingley Fairies weren't a family curiosity anymore. They were international news. The girls' identities were kept secret. The photographs were treated seriously. And people began asking whether this was finally proof of a world that existed beyond human sight. Then came 3 more photographs, 5 photographs in total, and each new image seemed to make the story more convincing. But there was something strange about them. The fairies looked almost exactly like the fairies people already imagined. Delicate wings, human faces, flowing hair, tiny bodies. They looked like they had stepped straight out of an illustrated storybook. And yet, people believed them. Even a clairvoyant named Geoffrey Hodson visited Cottingley and claimed he could perceive fairies himself. By 1922, Conan Doyle had included the photographs in his book, The Coming of the Fairies. The story had officially become part of pop culture. But there was a problem. The photographs contained a clue nobody seemed to notice. It would take more than 60 years for the clue to become obvious. In 1983, Elsie's finally explained what happened. The fairies were paper. She had copied figures from illustrations in a book called Princess Mary's Gift Book. Then she cut them out and placed them in the landscape. And the wings? Paper too. So how did they appear to be floating? Hat pins? The girls simply propped the figures up, took the photographs, and removed them afterwards. That's it. No supernatural explanation, no mysterious creatures, just 2 girls, some paper, a camera, and a very convincing illusion. But then came the strange part, because Elsie's confession didn't completely end the story. It reopened it. There were 5 photographs, and Elsie's eventually admitted that they were all faked. But Frances told a different story. She agreed that the earlier photographs had been staged, but she insisted the 5th photograph was real. It became known as the Fairy Sun Bath, and unlike the earlier photographs, it was much harder to make out. Frances said she had genuinely photographed something strange in the grass, something she believed was a fairy. She never changed her mind, not even after the hoax had been exposed. Frances died in 1986. Elsie's died 2 years later, and the two cousins never completely agreed about what the final photograph showed. So the mystery technically has an answer, but it also has one last question. What did Frances believe she saw? Today, we can manipulate a photograph in seconds, but in 1917, a photograph carried a different kind of authority. People trusted cameras. If something appeared in a photograph, it meant someone or something had been there, and that's what made Cottingley so powerful. The photographs gave people something they wanted to believe. Britain had just endured the First World War. People were grieving, spiritualism was growing, and many were searching for evidence of something beyond the world they could see. So when those photographs appeared, people didn't just see fairies, they saw possibilities, they saw hope. And maybe that's the real story of Cottingley. Not whether fairies existed, but how easily a photograph can become proof when we desperately want it to be true. More than a century later, the photographs are still here. So are the letters, the camera, the illustrations that inspired the fairies, and the photographs themselves. We know how the first images were made. We know that Elsie's eventually confessed. We know that Frances never completely accepted the explanation. And maybe that's why the story has lasted so long, because even after the trick was revealed, there was still one photograph left to argue about. One image, one disagreement, one tiny mystery that refused to disappear. Maybe Frances was mistaken. Maybe childhood imagination became memory, or maybe she simply never wanted to let the fairies go. We'll never know. But perhaps that's what makes the Cottingley Fairies so fascinating. The photographs weren't just about what was in front of the camera. They were about what people wanted to see. Some saw a hoax, some saw proof, some saw hope, and some still saw fairies. And that's where we'll leave the story. Not with a fairy, but with a photograph. This was One Photograph, One Story.